Well, we want to continue on with our train of thought on this initial set of articles. Species are not as distinct as textbooks would have us believe. Actually, the problem is things really are distinct. It's just they're going on the evolutionary presuppositions of that paradigm that's messing up everything that could be understood if they would just look at it objectively. Here's an article, another article from another issue of Science News. What makes a dinosaur? Defining what does gets harder with new fossil finds. Shouldn't more data confirm your theory and make it easier and complete the picture? Not if your theory's wrong, but let's just go on and take a look at this. This guy, Sterling Nesbitt, is a paleontologist at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. And he says, what is a dinosaur? It's essentially arbitrary. Another researcher at the Natural History Museum of Utah in Salt Lake City said, I often get asked what defines a dinosaur. Now, they immediately give credit to Sir Richard Owen, the first leader of the Royal Museum in London, who in 1841 invented the word dinosaur. Richard Owen, by the way, was a strong Bible-believing Christian. He stood scientifically against Darwin's theory his entire career. He was the one that discovered the Heracitherium fossil, which later evolutionists renamed Eohippus, which means dawn horse. The thing looked like a little Bambi sort of a thing, and they said that was the first horse. I'm sure you've seen the famous horse series in textbooks. But Sir Richard Owen decided it looked a lot like the rock hyraxes found and spoken of in the Bible, so he named it Heracitherium. Well, they rewrote that scientific history now, didn't they? But let's just go on with this problem they have with the dinosaurs. Look at what it says here. The largest extinction of species on Earth, the Great Dying, happened in the Permian period. 96% of all the marine species and 70% of all land species became extinct. Well, this is just the 252 million years is just something they presupposed about those layers. But what they are right about is there was something that happened in the past, about the time the Permian layer of rock was being sedimentary laid down during Noah's flood, and 96% of all things that were known to exist in the ocean that we know now once lived went extinct. Only air-breathing, blood-pumping things, the things that had the breath of life in their nostrils got on the ark. The rest of the things were at the mercy of the turbulence of Noah's flood. So a lot of things did go extinct. And 70% of the land species, they might have become extinct because of all of the environmental changes that happened on the earth due to the cataclysm, the tectonics, the atmospheric things, the temperature changes, the ice age that would have been triggered by Noah's flood right after that. But let's go on. That's another hint they should have gotten as to what might have been going on. Well, look at this one here. A new bonanza of dinosaurian type fossils reveals a repeating pattern of parallel evolution. Okay, you know what this means is they don't have one common ancestor for dinosaurs. There were like scads and scads of different kinds of living things that the first time they see them in a fossil record, they already had these traits. So what they have to do is pretend that evolution created dinosaur traits many, many, many times separately. Look, the odds of it happening once takes huge amount of faith to believe in, but to go and say, since they can't find the first one that did it and handed it down to the next generations, they have to now go ahead and say, oh, it happened many, 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 many times. Just since you believed it happened once, why not just believe it happened 50 times? This is getting more and more a faith-based, even a fantasy-based scientific theory. In other words, I don't even call it a scientific theory. Look what it says here. Well, the whole thing, their understanding doesn't explain how the dinosaurs survived the extinction at the end of the Triassic. I put survived in quotes because these rock layers, they'll just look and see where the fossils are, and the first layer as they're going from bottom to top that doesn't have something, they say, oh, it went extinct in the layer before. All it is they don't find dinosaurs in the higher layers. Well, reptiles, when they drown, sink. They don't float. Mammals and birds' bodies do float when they drown, which might explain why in Noah's flood you'd have bird and mammal fossils deposited in the upper layers. I mean, that's just known science. This is baffling the unbelievers and their presuppositions. Let's take a look a little bit more here. Oh, look. Today, scientists use computer algorithms to help construct elaborate phylogenetic trees or family trees or evolutionary trees. This has gotten so complicated, they have to use computers to help them manage to make this look real. But of course, they program the computers to refuse to believe that anything is true except evolution. So it just gets worse and worse and more complicated. Only a computer can handle the if, ands, and buts. Look what it says here. Indeed, one point arising from the study was just how subjective phylogenetic analyses can be. In other words, opinion. Irma says which species a study includes clearly affects how the tree turns out, so you can pick which ones you want to include. Dr. Walpuff at University of Michigan says that even what data to select shows a bias of researchers. Look what it says here. Plus, he adds a slight difference in how one person interprets the anatomy of a fossil can make a huge difference. Interpretation, subjective, opinion. We need computers to help us do this. If they'd only get the idea that they're barking up the wrong phylogenetic tree, maybe things would become a little more clear to them. Well, let's finish up the article here. It says, a flood of new discoveries reveals an unexpected complexity. Look, when they talk about how this is much more complicated than we thought, it means that the simple misconceptions, untruths, and even lies aren't working anymore. So this is all more complicated than we thought. Look at what it says here. But we've taken what we thought was a certainty and turned it into a mystery, and a big mystery at that. And then what's the answer? But the evolutionary tree is the common ground of all of this. See, they won't let go of that. They've decided to make that the sacred cow. This is the Rosetta Stone for interpreting all data biologically and paleontologically that they get, and they just won't use anything else to interpret the data. This is why they have the problem, and they can't see it. I was discussing this with another creation research, science education minister, and these people are not stupid. They're deluded, they're foolish, and they're stubborn and prideful. But what could make smart people believe a stupid thing? Well, the devil's got a lot of ways to do that, and he's the best liar in history. Jesus called him a liar and the father of it, and he was a liar from the beginning. He's good at it, so he's fooled a lot of people who can't understand the truth, because spiritual things are discerned spiritually, and the natural man can't understand it. So without an agreed upon evolutionary tree, it's hard to know which anatomical features follow through the tree in the evolutionary history, they say. Yeah, so since it's hard to do their work without trusting an evolutionary tree, they just go ahead and trust it and don't even question it, that is the way things must have happened. Paleontologists tend to say that finding more fossils is the surest way to fill in the gaps and to tidy up the family tree. But Nesbitt, that's the guy from Virginia Tech, says, now we have way more fossils and it's way messier. And I wonder why. It's because it's just getting worse and worse and worse. I still like to quote Dr. Gary Parker. Evolution thrives in the gray areas, thrives in the shadows, thrives. Evolutionary thinking only propagates well in areas where there's very little data. When new data, information, and scientific fact floods in, it chokes out evolution. And I have to make desperate attempts, dog ate my homework stories, fancy footwork, tap dancing around all of the data to still try to preserve our fanatical, religious, pseudo-scientific faith is true. It is, it is, it is. I do believe in evolution. I do believe in evolution. And so they don't give it up. They just won't. And it credits here Dr. Kevin Padian out at UCal Berkeley. He's the president of the National Science Education, National Center for Science Education Incorporated, a privately owned We Hate Creationists club. I met Dr. Padian when I was speaking at University of Nevada, Las Vegas one time. I attended his lecture, and he actually knew who I was in the audience. Somebody must have pointed me out, because we were talking about degrees, and he said, "Oh yeah, you have a master's in science education, right?" I said, "Well, it's a doctorate, but let's talk." So I invited him to come to my lecture the next day, and he excused himself, saying he had to listen to a dissertation defense on turtle shells, and left. But not before I had a few questions during his question and answer period. I asked, how? How can you say, because his whole talk was about how evolution is not random. How can you say it's not random when point mutations are random? And he gave some distracting evidences. And I said, well, that still doesn't explain how point mutations aren't random. And could you explain that? And then he gave some more. And I decided I'd be too pain in the rear if I asked again a third time. But somebody else in the audience said, what about, it was a student at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, said, what about what that guy over there asked? And Dr. Padian kind of lost it. He reprimanded the audience. He got angry. And when that happens, you know, they're really packing nothing. Don't let these people get you. The Bible says, let no man spoil your faith through vain philosophy. And that's exactly what the propagation of the theory of evolution by the atheist Evo-evangelist is all about. It's all about vain philosophy. But you keep thinking. God bless. Dr.